Allegiance, and then Councilmember Joy will provide our invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland and Territories, and head of the Commonwealth, defender of the faith, has passed away. We, the United States of America, former colonies under this crown, may have a sentimental attachment to the passing of the Queen and the designation of a new protector, but not our protector. We fought for independence and chose a destiny of our own making, a destiny that started with a narrowly defined idea of citizenship. A prescription of our Declaration of Independence of all men created equal was a command we failed to live up to. Without the courage of some of our presidents and Congresses, we would have continued to exclude many of our community members in suffrage of voting, decision-making, holding public office, and access to decision-making. We choose our head of state without regard to heredity. We choose our political leadership through a process that is meant to uphold the values of participatory democracy. Let us not fail in our endeavors to put the ideal into practice. A sincere thank you to those of our community who keep the peace and defend the participatory democracy we are here to exercise. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony, if you would call our roll, please.
Councilmember Shaw. Here. Gulick.
Here.
Neese.
Here.
Owen.
Excused.
Joy.
Here.
Chariki.
I am here.
Tidswell.
Here.
Purinton.
Here.
Boyette.
Here.
Rupsis.
Here.
Mayor Cole.
Here. This evening we have one set of minutes for approval from our meeting of August 22nd. Are there any changes, or is there any discussion or motion? Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. I move to approve the minutes for August 22nd, 2022.
Is there a second? Second. Second by Councilmember Neese. Any discussion or changes? Councilmember Neese?
I just trying to check with the clerk if the one change I had done on that minutes was that made?
It was.
Okay, so thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion? If not, we'll proceed to a vote. Motion is for approval. August 22nd minutes. If in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item up, our if I find my agenda. Courtesies. Our Hero Awards from Chief St. John is not going to happen this evening just because they're otherwise tied up, all those officers. And we do have, however, an announcement about National Police Women Day. And National Police Women Day is celebrated each year on September 12th, today. The day acknowledges and celebrates the contribution of female police officers who enforce law around law and order around the country. Roughly only 10% of the police force in the United States is made up of women. National Police Women Day hopes to rectify that by encouraging more women to join the service. Campaigns and events are organized to urge more women to take up law enforcement roles. Along with expressing gratitude to these officers, the day also hopes for a future where law enforcement bodies will have stronger female representation. Thank you for your service. National Police Women Day. With that, are there other courtesies this evening by other members of council? Seeing none, we'll move to our proclamations. We have three this evening. First, National Recovery Month, whereas the theme for Recovery Month 2022 is Recovery is for everyone, every person, every family, every community. Behavioral health is an essential part of health and one's overall wellness. And whereas recovery-oriented services for mental and or substance use disorders work, treatment is effective, and people recover in our area and around the nation. And whereas preventing and overcoming mental and or substance use disorders is essential to achieving healthy lifestyles, both physically and emotionally. And whereas we must encourage our community, relatives, and friends of people with mental and or substance use disorders to implement preventative measures, recognize the signs of a problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of the City of Billings, Montana, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2022 as National Recovery Month in Billings, and call upon the people of Billings to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies to support this year's Recovery Month. Terry, did you want to elaborate on the proclamation?
Thank you, Mayor Cole and Council, and thank you.
Is your mic on?
Plan ahead. Thank you, Mayor Cole, members of City Council, Councilmember Chiriki for helping us put this forward. The citizens of that are in recovery in Yellowstone County have planned an entire month of activities to help reduce the stigma and create interest in becoming part of the recovered community. On the first of the month, the Family Drug Court chalked the walk outside of the courthouse with recovery sayings. Rimrock has done a fantastic job. They've had 3 coffee shop pop-ups. There is one this Friday at Black Dog Coffee on 20th from 11 to 12. And on the 23rd, there is one at the rail line from 10 to 12. And they're there with banners that say recovery is. They're providing free coffee and just inviting the community to come and be part of. And so I would definitely encourage any of you to come down and check that out. There was sunrise yoga on the rims and a coffee break this weekend with the Phoenix Gym. And there is an entire month of activities just to help people become engrossed in what we consider recovery. So addiction and alcoholism is a disease of separation. It wants me to be separate from you. And so the more activities that we can plan where people can be involved in what's going on and be involved in their community, then it just helps with that recovery component. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to come tonight and receive the proclamation. And thank you for recognizing that recovery is important in Yellowstone County.
Thank you very much. Terry, in case you want the original, I'm going to just pass it down to that end. And thank you and your organization, everybody who works toward recovery in our community. Our next proclamation is in recognition of United Way events coming up. And the United Way proclamation this year reads as follows. Whereas for 62 years, United Way of Yellowstone County has been devoted to engaging the community and making a meaningful difference to improve people's lives. And whereas United Way rallies for change, crisis stabilization, senior independence, individuals battling with addiction and homelessness and hungry, and the health and wellness of our community. And whereas many volunteers joined together for Day of Caring projects to address our country's or our county's biggest human service problems, such as 211, code red door hanger distribution, poverty simulations, meal distribution, reading circles and mentoring, conducting wellness checks for seniors, and other important projects. And whereas volunteers are the backbone of our community, helping to produce tangible benefits for marginalized and underserved groups, and whereas United Way, along with all social service nonprofits, play a critical role in improving lives and alleviating suffering with our city's impoverished populations. And whereas United Way will host a community gathering to celebrate Day of Caring projects, collect Operation School Supply Drive materials, and kick off the annual campaign at the community rally on September 15th. That will be a fun, free admission, family-friendly event showcasing all of these valuable programs. And whereas United Way is built on the premise that we are better together. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of Billings, Montana, do hereby proclaim September 15, 2022 as a day to rally with United Way for our community. And we're privileged tonight to have Kim Lewis, Executive Director of United Way, with us. Kim, would you like to elaborate?
You bet. I think you said it all, though, on my behalf.
Okay.
Mayor and council members, thank you for the continued support of United Way. We pride ourselves in the relationship that we have with the city and the county to make not just Billings, but Yellowstone County better. We are a part of the fabric of the community for over 62 years, and this week, or this upcoming day on the 15th, really is a celebration, and we invite the whole community to come out and join us, either to volunteer their time, learn how to get engaged, learn how to be a voice for those that don't have one, or simply come and just have some fun and meet a neighbor. It's time to rally. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Finally, our last proclamation is recognition of Big Brothers Big Sisters Month, and reads as follows. Whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Yellowstone County, a youth empowerment organization that enables life-changing mentoring relationships to ignite the power and promise of youth in our community. And whereas investing in young people's futures pays off with a social return on investment of $18 to $1 through improved economic health and social outcomes for young people with mentors. And whereas by changing the course of young lives, we shape our community's social and economic future. And whereas Big Brothers Big Sisters of Yellowstone County has created 120 matches each year by partnering with parents, guardians, volunteers, and others in the community to help youth achieve higher aspirations, greater confidence, and better relationships, avoidance of risky behaviors, and educational success. And whereas the agency's goal is to encourage more volunteers to join our mentoring movement. Now, therefore, I, William Cole, Mayor of Billings, Montana, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2022 as Big Brothers Big Sisters Month. And yes, in case you were wondering, it is possible to have more than 1 month for one more than one organization per month in Billings. And I encourage everyone to volunteer or donate by visiting bbbsyc.org and learn more about how you can get involved in igniting the potential of youth in our community. I don't see anybody here, but wave your hand if you were here to comment further on Big Brother Big Sister Month. Seeing no one, we are encouraged to support these great organizations during this month. So that's the end of our proclamations for this evening. We'll move on then to council reports. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the last duties of former City Councilman Mike Yakovich was to tell me that I'm now in charge of the boards and commissions dinner once a year. So I've already started the process, and what I'm hoping tonight is to get some volunteers from the folks sitting at this table. So if you're interested in helping me with the dinner for all the people who volunteer throughout the city during the year, please send me an email so that I know who would like to help me. The date is October 25th. And that'll be going out to all the volunteers throughout the city. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. What's the day of the week?
That's a Tuesday.
That's a Tuesday. And it'll be at the community center?
The senior center.
Senior center.
There on North 23rd, I think it is.
Okay, very good. So you remember the time?
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock. Very good. Thank you. Councilmember Purinton.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that while I was in Missoula last week, I did go by Missoula Fire Department, and I visited with John Petroff, who is, well, I don't know what his official title is, but he is the program director for their, I think they call it, I don't even remember now, it's MST, but I don't remember what all that means. Missoula, I don't even know what it means. But anyway, it's their behavioral health units that they send out. And it was really interesting to see what they did. I visited with Chris and group today, and just to see, what the difference was, what we're kind of looking at versus what they're doing. And I think Jason has taken what he considers the best of Missoula's plan, as well as some other plans. And I find it to be a very compassionate group towards the mentally ill. And I think they have some good programs there. I think we probably have better programs here all around. So I look forward to seeing what comes of our RFP, and yeah, we'll just work with it and see how it goes.
Great. Thank you for being our eyes and ears in Missoula. Councilmember Joy.
Thank you. The CBD board met this month and really discussed how to prepare for the caper that they'll be presenting tonight. So you will all get a really thorough update and deeper look into what CBD does. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Any other council reports? Not seeing any. We'll move to our city administrator report. Chris, do you have anything for us before we move to public comment on other items?
Yes, Mayor and Council, though we had no ex parte communication for tonight, so my comments actually are an update per last week's discussion on our 2 mills in our local option marijuana money. So on the front of crisis response units, as Councilmember Purinton mentioned, some good news on moving forward. As you know, the request for proposals is out on the street. We did have a Substance Abuse Connect meeting last Thursday morning, and that board voted unanimously to submit a proposal with its partners, and there were other behavioral health, mental health experts who also indicated they likely will put proposals in as well. And that conversation was very, I'd say it was healthy, strong, collaborative. It wasn't, it's all or nothing. There was a recognition there amongst the professionals that we're all looking for what package may be put together best for our community. So we fully expect out of that discussion, you never know it until you open the proposals, but it looks like a minimum of a couple of proposals we will receive here at the end of the month. Secondly, I did volunteer to be on the hiring committee for the replacement of that executive director position. Both myself and county chair of the county commissions, he'll be there, as well as a handful of other. Fourth, that group, not so detailed for us, but we did vote to begin to advance down the path of creating a 501c3. SAC is really not an entity. I mean, it's a coalition of groups, which is good, but ultimately, long-term, there's some real value in them establishing that position. So those are all advancements on crisis response. Also tied to that, we had a brief conversation that I'll follow up with them on our prevention investments, nurse-family partnership, as well as other preventative opportunities that exist in the community. That's probably where I spent, honestly, the least of my time since our last discussion, but I do have some names there at that SAC table, folks who can help us look across the range of programs in addition to what I thought was enthusiastic about nurse-family partnership. And then third, save the most challenging for last, the low barrier shelter. So I'll just say several meetings with just a handful of folks who were involved in continuum of care, trying to progress how might we put something together out of last week's discussion where we get good data to understand both short and long term. There's a strong recognition there. In my meetings with the police department and continuum of care and MRM, basically my starting point is what should the short list of have to do's in order to get $1 from the city include? So we're establishing that, as well as trying to figure out how could this work, frankly, in the relationship more similar to what we have with Substance Abuse Connect, where you got a lot of professionals around the table, putting their minds together, sacrificing to a degree for the benefit of the overall community, while at the same time willing to say, hey, and we're going to put a proposal in from us as well. So I don't have anything conclusive there for you, but there'll be more this week as we keep this moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. And good luck. We appreciate you pursuing those conversations. Council Member Neese?
Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda to include a segment of public comment on non-public items to be determined at the length of your doing, depending on how the number of public comments that are there.
Okay. Councilmember Purinton, second? Okay, so the motion is to, as we have done frequently, to allow for public comment on non-agenda items at the beginning of our session. Councilmember Neese, just to clarify, would we include that as part of the next item, public comment on non-public hearing items 1 and 2 as a package, or would we segregate these?
I'd like to keep it segregated so that way we keep all the agenda items afterwards.
So would the next item up be on non-agenda items?
Okay. Next item would be the non-agenda items.
Okay. Okay. If the motion is clear, we'll have a vote. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes, so our agenda is amended. So what that means for anybody who might be listening out there is if you came to speak about something that is not on our agenda tonight, and a copy of the agenda is back on that cart, rather than having to wait to the very end of the meeting, which would be certainly several hours from now, because of this motion, we don't want you to have to sit there so long, and this would be an opportunity that you'll have to speak on anything not on our agenda. You can also wait till the end of the meeting if you're having that much fun. Feel free to do so, but you don't have to. So we'll open it up for public comment now on only items that are not on our agenda this evening. If you came to speak to that, please come forward. Just ask that you tell us your name and address and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. This is your opportunity.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Chris, thank you. St. John, I see you back there. Thank you for coming. Got a couple questions for you. So.
We just need name and address.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bill, for reminding me of that. Wesley Dunn, Dorothy Lane. OP clearinghouse@gmail.com. I will repeat that. OP clearinghouse@gmail.com. Operation Clearinghouse. Chris, if you don't mind, will you pass these out to the council? Thank you. So I thought these were pretty neat. My employer had all the employees take this personality test, and thought it was kind of odd at first, but after taking it, I thought it fit my agenda. So let's talk about it. That right there says that I'm a defender. So if I come off hostile or wanting to fight, that's why. But I'm not wanting to fight you physically. I'm wanting to fight for what's right. So, anyways, y'all can look over that. My role is I'm a sentinel. Y'all can look that up if you'd like to. So, just to clarify that, that's the reason why I'm here. I see what's wrong. I see what's right. And we all know what's wrong. So, first off, I want to thank Jennifer Owens and Mr. Roy here. August 4th, we had a meeting with St. John and some other officials. And St. John spoke for a few minutes, and I got up and walked out. He might have thought that I was going to grab a gun, shoot up a place. He might have thought that. I know Scott Emmerich did. But that ain't what I did. I got up because he lied to my face. He straight lied to my face and everybody that was there. And I don't take too well with liars. Sorry, I don't. You lie to me, I'm gonna wash my hands of you. So with that, I learned how to manage my anger in the last 2 years. And I got up and walked away. Because that man lied to my face. But I want to thank Jennifer and Roy again, because what that meeting taught me is the city don't take it too well when you scream and yell at your crackhead neighbors for almost 24 hours. City don't like that. I learned that from that meeting. I also learned that Mr. Rich himself is a liar. I learned that, so thank you, Roy. Thank you, Jennifer. I also want to pay respects when they are due, and so Mr. Officer Cofield and Mr. Officer Woody should get the utmost respect from every citizen and everybody in this room. Those two individuals right there is the only two individuals that I have seen and witnessed any altercation, anything that I've had going on Dorothy Lane that I've called, that they were utmost respectful to me and my family. They did their job, they served me, they protected me. It's a shame that they did their job, they arrested the man, took him down to jail, but immediately released him. That's a shame. Immediately released him. So I want to give respect where respect is due. Officer Cofield, Officer Woody, you have my respect. And I want the citizens of Billings, if they ever come in contact with Mr. Officer Cofield or Woody, very respectable gentleman. Also, ex-military. Ex-military, Chris. Chief St. John, ex-military.
Okay, Wes, you're now a couple minutes over, so.
No, I got just a couple more things. Just a couple more things.
If you'd make it very quick.
So with that Operation Clearinghouse, I want to help. I want to help. So I want anybody else, any family, the 400 families that are going through the same thing that we are going through, I want them to reach out to me. I want to help. I want to install some cameras. I want to let them know how to deal with the police. I want to let them know everything that I'm going through. So citizens, reach out to that email I just gave you, because I'm here to help. But police don't want to help you, I will help you. The ladies that are out there, they're single moms that are getting their bikes stolen from crackheads, their neighbors, reach out to me. I want to help you. I want to help you. So if you're not going to let me speak anymore, then I totally understand that. I respect that, Mr. Bill.
Yeah, I think you've now doubled the time, so I think we should wrap up.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
So, with this right here, it got my wife. Got my wife, St. John. Didn't get me, buddy. I worked for you for 7 years. I know your games. I know it's a chess match. He took the spotlight off of what I came here to say the first meeting. Child endangerment, harassment, and an individual's name that I gave you. Well, I'm going to throw endangerment in there again. 73 times, Mr. St. John. 73 times, Council and Chris. How about that? 73 times he let those officers endanger the citizens of Billings.
Wes,
73 times.
Wes, we understand.
They harassed.
Wes, we understand you're upset.
I'm not upset, sir.
Well, obviously
I'm not
you
upset.
are.
I'm stating facts.
But just remember, now we talked a lot about
Okay, so
respect.
73 times.
Wes, you talked a lot about respect. And you're not giving.
Child endangerment.
Wes, you're not giving the respect to this crew who came here to listen when we gave you more than double your amount of time. And
you,
you're
sir.
trying to pull you're trying to
Don't
pull
tell me what I'm
us
trying to pull,
into
Mr.
something.
Bill.
We don't want to go there.
Don't tell me what I'm
Okay?
trying to pull. You don't know me.
Okay, just please sit down. We'll listen to the next speaker.
Thank you.
Give the respect to this audience,
The last
okay?
time I'll be back. This ain't over. Letting everybody know I'm here to help. Anybody want to reach out? I want to help these people that are going through the
Thank you
same
very much.
stuff that I'm
You
going
made that
through.
point clear. Thank you.
Chris, thank
Okay,
you.
next speaker. Go ahead.
Bye, John. Thank you.
Good evening, Jacqueline Garcia, Dorothy Lane. We all know we have an overcrowded jail system here in Billings. Offenders are being turned away literally at the door. They are taken and they are literally turned away because it's overcrowded. Can't make them sleep on the ground? Why not? They're criminals. Officers are unable to do their job, and that is what they say. They say they can't do it because no one will allow them to. Rich St. John continues to talk about the system's broken. The system's broken. Why aren't we fixing the system? Everyone wants to blame someone else, including blaming the citizens for not passing the jail expansion initiative. How can the city council back stricter laws when the laws that are already in place cannot be enforced. I sat here and listened to you guys wanting to back stricter laws. That's awesome, but they can't be enforced. These criminals can't be taken to jail. We need to go back to the basic fundamentals of criminals fearing the justice system. When do we stop blaming and start taking leadership positions seriously for what they are? According to the chief DA, the only people locked up are murderers. So all other criminals are just cited and released back into the streets to commit more crimes because they know nothing's going to happen. And it's costing our city millions of dollars. Between the police officers, the hospitals, it's costing $1 million. That can go to expanding the jail. Why do we have to keep talking about it over and over and over again? It's time to take pride in our city. Leadership roles are not just a 9-to-5 job, 8 hours a day. It takes people to stand up. We need leaders that will take pride and fight for change in our community. How can we fight together as a team to make Billings better? I'm not just putting it off on City Council or the police department. How as a team can we work together to make Billings safer? We need to make the jail bigger, so let's stop blaming people. Let's take pride in our jobs. Get the governor to come out and hear. Why doesn't the governor ever come out here and hear our frustrations of the jail is not big enough? Our city has about 180,000 people, right? Our jail only holds about 500 people. We keep approving more housing communities. Housing developments, they keep getting approved to be bigger and bigger and bigger. But no one is facing the facts that we need a bigger jail system. Why are us as citizens having to be responsible for these criminals? We keep fighting a system that is broken. Everyone has said our system's broken. Why aren't we trying to fix this system?
And Jackie, your time did go up, but if you could wrap up, then we're with you.
We have vacant buildings all over this town. You go downtown, there's vacant buildings. Why can't those be turned into housing units for the non-violent offenders? Why can't we figure out something to stop these people? Our children's lives are in jeopardy. They're in jeopardy every day. We need to make a change. Stop talking about it. Be about it. Enough is enough. Get the community members. Let's fight together, not against each other.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate your specific constructive comments. For anybody who's interested in that topic, the county commissioners of Yellowstone County meet at 10 o'clock on Tuesdays? Is that the right time? 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock.
2 on Mondays.
9:30.
9:30 on Tuesday? Tuesday mornings at 9:30 every week, or they have one on Thursday? Every week. Okay, so because the city certainly would like to work with citizens on that topic of jail expansion. So, and
The only thing is
county
most
jail.
of us
So
work,
thank
so
you
we
very
can't
much.
really go
so
to
go ahead.
those
We just
things.
need
Okay.
name and address.
Okay. Amber Dunn, Dorothy Lane. I'm going to start by reading a code of conduct for all law enforcement, and Article 4 states, matters of confidential nature and the possession of law enforcement officials shall be kept confidential unless the performance of the duty or needs of justice strictly require otherwise. By the nature of their duties, law enforcement officials obtain information which may relate to private lives or potentially harmful in interest, and especially to the reputation of others. Great care should be exercised for safeguarding and using such information which should be disclosed only in the performance of duty or to serve the needs of justice. Any disclosure of such information for any other purpose is wholly improper. I only read you that because that's exactly what Chief St. John is guilty of with this letter he gave you. I told you I'd be back this week to go against the call log. I'm gonna start here. Everybody know what this flag is right here? St. John, I'll ask you. United States flag, correct? No,
Amber, please,
I need to.
Please
There's
address
a
it to
point
us,
to this.
please. Thank
Please
you.
hear me. This is the Montana flag, and this is the Georgia state flag. If you look at the very first call that St. John put on this letter, which has absolutely nothing to do with the neighbors, it says we have a Confederate flag that was shot. This goes right along with his accusations of us being racist. He only put this in here for you guys to see that, which would make you hyper-focus on the proxy profiling. That has nothing to do with this neighbor. Why is it in here? This was another part of your wasted time. The next call, if you look, was the same syringe that was found in 2022. He just changed the date to 2020. He also put it 2022. You look at 8-4, he says my husband was arrested for something that was strictly between us. Problem is, this is 21 days too early. Again, fraudulent information. The occurrence happened August 23rd, where he states both people were left at home. That's not true. Yet again, why is this in your call log? This has nothing to do with the situation that we came to speak to you about. Our personal business has nothing to do with this call log, and he put it out there. That again is defamation of character. This is nothing to do with why we came in the first place. Had nothing to do with our meeting on August 4th, had nothing to do with my husband being loud for 2 days, had nothing to do with any of that, but he put it out here for you guys. You also see that he puts 8/25/2021 as to when the cops came with my husband to get his belongings. Sorry, that was 2 days later, 8/25/2020. There's a whole year missing in this call log. An entire year of calls missing. You don't have the time for me to go through every single one of these, but again, I ask you, reach out. I'll go over every one of these call logs, because if you look, there's stuff on here, there's stuff on here, there's writing on here, there's stuff on here, there's stuff on here, there's stuff on every page of this call log that is unfounded and fraudulent information that that man posted for you guys. So I'm gonna say one more thing and then I'll be done, Mayor Cole. I work for a locally owned business here, and I'm the sole purchaser of the entire company. And if I wrote my boss a letter and gave fraudulent information, I would no longer have a job. So I'm requesting the resignation of Chief St. John on the sole purpose of he cannot give you founded, legal, correct information. He likes to take the spotlight off of the situation at hand, which is the safety of this community that we all are a part of, and put it on something else that has nothing to do with the other. I won't waste my time with what my husband calls baloney anymore because he heard what I needed to say. But there is no way this can be right to do by someone who holds such a high place in our community. And I'm really hoping that you all understand that this should not be allowed in this community. If he lies about this, what else will he lie about? I actually have more information on that, so I'll talk about that next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else on anything not on our agenda for this evening? Okay, we'll close that component of our public comment period and move on to the next item, which is public comment on the non-public hearing items that are on our agenda tonight. So that's item 1, our consent agenda, and any of the sub-items, and item 2, the TIF application for Billings Hardware. Mr. Brooks.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Dan Brooks with the Billings Chamber of Commerce at 815 South 27th Street. Here before you tonight, encouraging a yes vote on agenda item number 2, the TIF application for mixed-use downtown residential. I won't belabor the points that I made in my letter to you earlier, namely addressing our housing issues with some additional housing in a great location downtown, but also the safety benefits that come along with it. Bringing residential to an area, especially downtown, has the additional benefit of bringing what we call in SEPTED eyes on the street. Really, you can think of that as kind of a 24/7 neighborhood watch, so bringing that benefit as well. So that was kind of part one. Wanted to encourage your yes vote on that. And then two, I wanted to thank you as well for your previous yes votes on some similar TIF applications earlier this year. When I had gone and looked back, there were a couple other votes that, assuming a favorable vote on this one, would bring the number of approved TIF residential units in downtown to 84, which is pretty significant. When I looked up on I guess the most recent version of a downtown housing study that we have, they looked at some residential units that were added between the years, I think it was about 2001 and 2016, so over a 15-year period, 134 units were added. So 84 coming online in the next couple of years is something to be excited about, in my opinion. So thank you for those votes, and I encourage your yes vote on agenda item number 2. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on ready to comment on item 1, the consent agenda, any of the sub items, or item number 2? Any further comment on those items? Seeing none, we'll move on then to our item number 1, our consent agenda. First, are there any separations? Council, any separations from our consent agenda? Don't see any. Okay. Councilmember Gillick?
I would move to approve the items on the consent agenda as submitted. Since there's no separations, nothing to be separated.
Councilmember Boyette makes the second. Any discussion? Councilmember Purrington, and then Councilmember Denise.
Thank you. So, Chief, I needed a question. I suppose this would go to you. Your donation from the Sapphire Lounge and Casino. On our staff memo, it said that this would have no financial impact on the city. And I just wanted to say that it was always my understanding that it does impact the city because it provides more funding to the police department. So when you get these donations, do you have a specific place that they go, and do they augment what we have, or does it actually replace some of the budget items that now we have more money in savings?
Yeah, council member, thanks for the question. We have donation accounts, and donors may specify what they want their money to go to. K9 is a great example. We get significant donations for that program, but if they don't, we just have a general fund that we put those monies into, and you're absolutely right. We use donated monies to augment and supplement things that we need that are outside of our budget. We do not supplant things. I mean, our budget is our budget, and if it's not in there, then we need to find other ways to help support that.
Well, I'd just like to commend the Sapphire Casino and Lounge because I think they give you a little bit of dollars here and there. So I think they do some fundraising for our police department. So I do, thank them for doing that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, they certainly do. They were pleased with the police response a couple of years ago and unilaterally put together a function about this time of year. And you can see what the result was through the work of a few hours. So very, very appreciative and thankful for this group and all the others that have donated money.
Thank you, Chief. And for everybody who might be listening, that gift this year is $6,065, which is a very significant donation. So, again, our thank you on behalf of the whole city to the Sapphire Lounge and Casino.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Bernice?
That is exactly what I was going to bring up, so thank you again.
All right, thank you. I'll just comment on item 1H, the preliminary major plat for St. Vincent Healthcare. If you caught it in your packet, you might have seen that that is a purely commercial subdivision, but it includes a 3-acre dedication of parkland, private parkland, for the use of people in that large subdivision. The state law on park dedication only applies to residential, and so it's not a requirement of state law, and yet it shows the value of park in large commercial development. So imagine a situation where you've got maybe a couple thousand people in an office complex who are maybe a couple miles away from any park. But every day, especially when the weather is nice, they would love to have access to that park for lunch or meetings or just the beauty of the area. I'm not making any proposal except to say that theoretically, I suppose we could enact some sort of mandatory park dedication even in commercial areas under the right circumstances where there was a high density of people and a likelihood of it being used, not some industrial area, presumably, that might have two crane operators or something in a square mile, but just an observation there. So any further discussion on the motion to approve the consent agenda? Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval. All the items on the consent agenda. If in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
If opposed, please say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Brings us to our regular agenda and item number 2. Tony, would you read item number 2?
Item number 2, tax increment financing assistance from Downtown Urban Renewal District to Old Billings Hardware Development Venture LP for improvements at 2802 Montana Avenue. Downtown Billings Partnership Board recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Our presentation this evening is going to be by Mehmet Casey. Once the PowerPoint is up. Mehmet.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for your time. Yes, let's see here. As we're setting up the presentation, I'll get my timer going here. Kevin, you move this off the screen. You move that off the screen. Okay, perfect. Yep, it's working. Awesome. Thank you, Andy. So yes, Mehmet Casey with the Downtown Billings Partnership, and tonight's presentation is a tax increment financing project presentation on the building that you see in the picture in front of you at 2802 Montana Avenue, corner of Broadway and Montana Avenue. And I'm going to be very brief about its history because we can spend all night talking about the history of this building. It's got a very rich history, but briefly, it was built between the years 1908, 1909 as the location for the Billings Hardware at the time, founded by the 3 businessmen and entrepreneurs at the time. This was, I believe, the initial business started in 1903. And it was located in the southwest corner of 27th and Montana Avenue, the building today we know as the Oliver Building. That's where their business started, but they progressively and quickly grew, and there was an opportunity of an expansion and growth, and this site was determined as the place for them to go acquire and build up upon. So then this building was constructed in those years, and they relocated into that building. They continued to operate in that building until about the 50s. In the 50s, actually, quick note, when they were operating in that building, they were so successful and thriving economically that the railroad did something that's unusual where they sold them the land in exchange for shares in the company. So they became owners of the building and the land. In the 1950s, they sold it to the Shields Hardware at the time. And then fast forward to the 80s, the Westwood Appliances moved in, and then fast forward to the 90s, the Coldburn School Supply was the last tenant of that building. At some point in between, it might have been the 50s, when Billings Hardware moved out, the land went back to the railroad. But then in I believe the year 2010, when it was purchased again by the current family, it was negotiated that the purchase would include the land. And so it was reacquired entirely as a package, the building and the land. Some efforts were made. Of course, as that change happened, it had to get recertified, so that took some time. Some efforts were made for a feasibility study in the 2014. Unfortunately, Mr. Neil Lefevre in 2015 passed away, and so that kind of delayed a little bit of the process, and it took some time to regroup. And then in 2018, the effort came back to revisit this project and this site. And here we are tonight. So that's the building. One note to make also, this is, I believe, as far as I know, the last building standing of that size on Montana Avenue that is yet to be developed or redeveloped. And so it's a considerable size, and you'll see a lot more details about that building here. So here's a little bit of details about the future of the building. The bottom pictures is as you see it today, as it exists today. The top pictures are renderings of what it would look like in the future. As you can see, it's working within the spirit and the history and the character of the existing building and the structure and the asset. And obviously reinforcing all of that and restoring it and having it stand for another 100 years. The ground level is going to be business occupied, so the focus is going to be retail of some sort, whether it's shopping, restaurants, activity-based businesses. Not secured yet with the businesses, but this hopefully will send out the message too, so that people can start reaching out. It could be potentially one tenant, but it will likely be several tenants because of the square footage. And that way it'll be a nice diversity of business activity at the ground level. The basement is also expected to be business activity, and then the second, third floors are going to be residential units, 12 units in each for a total of 24 units. The next slide just talks a little bit about the site from an aerial view, just showing some existing landscaping around the building and the structure and the neighborhood, and how they'll work to maintain that and work within the surrounding neighborhood in terms of landscaping and hardscaping. But one thing also to point out from this view is the property line to the back, where it has room for some parking options, about 13 units. Because part of that is also giving access to the employees of the Western Heritage Center, so they're able to park behind their building too. So that again is part of the property line. So that's all part of the package and what they own. The rest of the renderings are preliminary, as you can see, and as indicated on the picture, but this is an image of the basement. As you can see from the layout, it could be potentially three separate businesses, but it can also be one big, large business. Ideally and hopefully, if they can land somebody who can work with the existing cabinets and shelving that's still in there, that would be preferable and cool, but ultimately, whoever fits the design and the space will be able to use that. As we go up, let me go back a little bit here. This is also a picture of the ground floor, and as you can see it on the east side, there's some existing wall that could be treated as a separate unit, and the rest of it could be one entire unit. Or along these pillars that you can see, some partitions can be added for individual businesses. So I forgot to mention that at the ground level. But as we get upstairs, second floor and third floor are very similar, 12 units each. The corner units are mostly your two-bedroom apartments. There's one in the middle that's also a two-bedroom, so there's a total of 5 two-bedroom apartments in each floor, and the rest are one-bedroom apartments. Again, third floor is very similar layout. And here's the breakdown of the expenses that the board looked at and recommends reimbursements in these categories. You'll see the majority of them fit in the 4288 MCA, which is the brick and mortar, foundational, structural, long-term longevity, safety improvements to the building. There are a few exterior improvements that you'll see, the storefronts, the doors and windows, the landscaping, streetscaping, hardscaping, those kind of things, some access to the public utilities. And then the project by the numbers, the current assessed value of the property and then the estimated increase. Always we look at 80% of the project cost, and leaving us with the anticipated commercial tax rate and the annual tax increment. So that leaves you with a 9-year return on investment with the total TIF award. And in terms of merits, honestly, this ticks all the boxes. It answers to the housing needs that we have, safety improvements in and around that building, retail recruitment at the street level and activation at the street level, complies with all the guiding documents, whether the local at the city level or the state level, preserving another historic landmark in our downtown, activating an otherwise large parcel and building, and then complementing the growth of downtown in specific, Billings in general. So with that, the partnership recommends the award not to exceed $745,000. This would also be in 5 reimbursements of $149,000 a year, following the year in which the project is completed. That's where the disbursements would begin, and obviously the standard expectation that the developer will sign a development agreement. One thing that's not in the slides that I will also make sure to mention is a couple of weeks ago, I think a few weeks ago, you will have received in your weekly updates from city staff that the downtown TIF district did take a devaluation. So we took that into consideration. The board worked with the city staff diligently, vigilantly, and creatively and innovatively to make sure to account for that in terms of TIF forecast, meeting our debt obligations, pledged programs, and still making sure that we have capacity for new projects, but also forecasting conservatively to make sure that we weather certain hits like that. But we also know there are several variables that are coming down the road that we shouldn't be in that position in a frequent manner as we've seen in the past. And we'll be able to recover from that hit. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. I have the applicants and the developer here if you have specific questions for them, or if I misstated anything, please feel free to correct me too on that.
And before we jump into questions, if the developer or developer's agent, Eric, architect, want to comment before, you're welcome to do so. It's up to you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see you all again. Eric Schmidt, High Plains Architects, representing the development company, the owners, and the limited investors for this project. We're very thankful that you're hearing our application today. I can take any questions that you have. I think Mehmet did a great job of hitting some of the highlights of the building for you, but I will touch on 3 other things that we are pursuing as a part of this project that I think make it exceptional. The first is the fact that this is an historic building for Billings, and as such, we will be pursuing historic tax credits for this project as part of our financing scheme for the building. Has the benefit of bringing in, I think, almost $1 million in potential equity to this project, which is absolutely fantastic. And as we know through our High Plains exceptional experience with historic tax credits, is that it is a very successful system, and we have seen it yield great results for our projects, and this building is an exemplar candidate for the redevelopment and the historic tax credit. So it allows us to bring new uses into the building and revitalize it. And we've had good remarks from the State Historic Preservation Officer as it is a candidate. So historic tax credits, as well as we will be pursuing LEED certification, that's Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and we are pursuing Platinum certification, that is the highest level of sustainability that the U.S. Green Building Council acknowledges. So we're hoping that this will be a hyper-sustainable building, managing stormwater on site, recycling gray water for toilet flushing to reduce demand on city infrastructure, generating its own electricity on site, and we are proud to also try try to limit our carbon footprint by not installing new gas lines into the building. So everything will be electric and try to generate as much as we can on the building. So we're quite excited to pursue that and make it affordable to live in for our new tenants. So a couple really exciting things there. And of course, we want the building to be financially performing well for for the TIF, for our developers. And I just want to also highlight the great development limited partnership team that we have behind us, who majority of which are young investors under the age of 40, all from Billings or the Yellowstone County area. So it's great to see people in my generation investing in downtown, investing in these buildings, and really making Billings the place that they want to see here. So we're excited to bring that up with here today. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Boyette and I, we're under 40. Would you like to throw in a few bucks here, Councilmember Boyette, maybe? Okay. We'll have that conversation later. Questions for Mehmet or the developer or agent? Councilmember Bernice, Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. A few questions here. Parking, can you go over where the parking is going to be for the 24 tenants? I'm assuming, are they going to not have vehicles? Are they going to have vehicles? What's the plan?
Good question. Yeah, so the existing model here shows 13 parking units. Eric, feel free to chime in here too if the plan is to have this for the residents or the businesses that will occupy the ground level. But again, traditionally in the downtown footprint, we are familiar with developments that don't include this, and our code allows that too. So it's not to be expected. Urban dwellers and folks that live in the downtown area rely on transit or partner with the existing garages where they would park. So this is an added bonus to have that, but I'll maybe defer to Eric to shed some more light on.
Shed some light on that, if you wouldn't mind, because how does that fit into our codes as far as a lot of times we have developments, we typically have to have so much parking per unit and stuff like that?
Absolutely. In the central business district zoning area, we do not have a parking requirement. Okay. So we are providing the 13 spaces on site as a potential lease to a tenant. So if they want parking downtown, they can rent that spot for a couple extra bucks. We will also be looking at some bike storage infrastructure space inside the building to promote alternative transportation as well, and gladly point them across the street at the nice parking garage too if they want to store a couple more cars there. So
okay.
Hey Eric, while we've got you on that topic, because it's right on that, can you just tell us the status of car share programs in Billings now, in particular Zipcar and some of the others that are becoming quite popular?
I wish I could comment. I don't know anything about that. I might have to defer to someone else in the audience.
Okay. Well, it's nothing critical. Councilmember Bernice, you said something else.
Yeah, and Eric, one of the things I've been to some LEED Platinum buildings here recently, and on the rooftops they have foliage, trees. Mm-hmm. Now in your pictures they didn't have trees. Do you plan on having trees, fruit trees, things like that on the rooftop? How much of the rooftop is actually going to be accessible to the residents?
We are planning on a rooftop patio as an amenity for the residents, and with that there will be some garden space, some residential planting, or some smaller container gardens. No big extensive green roofs or trees. We need to use the majority of our roof space for the solar panel array as well as for the water collection and mechanical equipment. We are leaving a little bit of excess space for mechanical equipment for any potential commercial tenants, and if they don't need that much space, maybe we'll get a tree up there.
Okay, and Mayor, if you don't mind, I have a question for Mehmet.
Sure.
Mehmet, again, great project to see residential coming downtown. And I've talked about that before. It's good to see that. But I want to talk to you about your ROI, because when I looked up the tax roll, they pay about $10,000 now in taxes, and you indicated they're going to do about $113,000 in taxes, what they're going to pay. So they're about $100,000 they're going to be paying over in the time. It comes out to actually only 7.3 is the way I calculate it, but maybe I'm missing something on that. But more concerning is, even if it's 7.3, it appears to me that this is going to not be really increase in value until it's done in 5 years. So we're looking at, on your estimate, 14 years, or maybe 12, 13 years as far as the payback before it can really start building into the TIF fund. That's concerning to me. Did you look at that and realize or understand that this is a longer term project before anything is going to be occupiable and that. So, I mean, I would love to see it happen in 2 years, not 5. But did you stretch it out 5 years because you don't think the funds are going to be there, or is the developer saying, no, we're going to take it 5 years to build it, and then we'll occupy it, and then that's when the taxes start coming in?
A little bit of both, yeah. So, Councilman Neese, so the project, if it doesn't run into any other complications, is projected to be done spring of '24. And so the way we have all TIF districts designed is that's fiscal year 25? 24, sorry. So then they'd be eligible for the first reimbursement in fiscal year 25. And then, so one is that the project is not complete until then, so we're not going to allocate them funds until it's complete. And then two, when they return and provide us with all the proof of payments, it has to match everything they've asked for. And then the breakdown of the 5-year is in relation a little bit to a couple of things, actually. One is how much we have available right now that we can play with or we can pledge for in the future. And then two, based on the projections, making sure that we're able to have more that can be, that could be gone or be taken to another project so that we're not completely tied up to zero.
Right.
In terms of the projections, I just want to double check on one component. Did you check the property taxes or the taxable value that they're paying?
Property taxes.
Property
Actually, what's
taxes.
coming, what they're paying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, this is based on what is projected that will be contributed to the taxable district or the taxable value. And again, this has been brought up at previous council meetings. Unfortunately, we don't have enough history on existing previous projects to see if this method is 100% accurate, but at least we have we have something in place right now that we can track. I've actually started tracking previous projects like the Sawyer Griffin building on Montana Avenue and the McDonald Lofts on 29th, because those were 2016, 2017, just to see the return. And it's been increases in all the way, based on the year, all the way from a 5% increase to a 96% increase. And so monitoring that is going to give us more data to measure these accurately in the future, and also having something in place to measure it will help to make some tweaks down the road.
And just to clarify, did I hear you say that it should come online in 2024? Is that when it will be done?
Spring of 2024.
Okay.
Fingers
And
crossed,
that's when the tax rolls will
complete.
come out after. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, I was recently looking at a new apartment building on the West End, and a one-bedroom was $1,400, which I thought, I wonder who can afford that. So can you tell me what the one-bedroom would rent for in this particular building?
Good question, yeah. And I believe if I have that accurate off the top of my head, it's a range between, based on the size, it's a range between 1,100 to 1,400. Is that about right?
Yeah.
So it's the mid-range market rate. I will say I agree with you, and I also saw a couple of recent developments. I won't mention the neighborhood, or like the exact places, but on the West End that are starting at 16 too. And it's unfortunately it's all market rate. That's the world we live in. But I think also there is validity in increasing the supply, which will help the overall affordability as people have more options to move around and access these options.
So then, you know, the tenant may not care if it's a platinum LEED building because he just wants the place to live.
Right.
What is the cost going up? Does that change the value of what the person's going to pay for rent if it was gold or silver versus platinum?
Looks like Randy wants to chime in on that.
They don't actually care, right?
That's a fair question, Mike. I appreciate your question. But first of all, we do high-performance buildings with no premium cost to our construction cost because of the way we do it. So the benefit to a tenant is that everything's electric, their heat and cooling is included in their rent, so their one utility is their electricity, which runs about $15 a month. And so we're also not subject to the volatility in the market because we're generating most of our power on the roof. We don't have gas. And so that keeps our ability, we're going to start where we're starting at 1,100 to 1,400 range, but our rents aren't going to have to go up at the same rate as everybody else because a lot of our our variable costs we don't have in the same way that new construction has or just conventional construction has. So the tenant's not paying any premium. They're getting all the benefits of a lower and more stable rent over time.
Go ahead.
So the sun is out during the daytime, but not at nighttime. So will there be batteries in the basement?
No, it's a net meter. So we just run the meter backwards when the sun's shining and then forward the other time. And I don't know that we know exactly yet what percentage of our total energy consumption will come off the sun, but we're going to put up to a 50 kW array, which is the maximum size that we can under the current regulations, and that's going to be a substantial amount of the power needed in this building.
Okay, further questions, Councilmember Shaw, Princeton?
Thank you. I move to approve the tax increment financing assistance from Downtown Urban Renewal District to Old Billings Hardware Development Venture, LP, as recommended by the DBP Board.
Second.
Motion made, seconded by Councilmember Neese. Discussion now. Councilmember Shaw, you wanted to speak to your motion? Go ahead. Councilmember Shaw, it's your motion. Go ahead and speak to it.
Okay. So I will speak to it briefly. And I think what I want to say is, please keep bringing us housing projects. These are very exciting. Hearing that number that we have potentially increased the downtown housing by 84 units is really significant, especially compared to whatever the period was 15 years before that. So I'm very encouraged by this, by the momentum of this, and I love that the downtown TIF is putting a lot of energy into these housing projects and bringing developers along saying this is what we're looking for. So I think this is fantastic for Billings. I've been driving by this building for years wondering, like, who owns this? Why does it look like this? How do we turn it around? And so 2 thumbs up.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Princeton and then Councilmember Gillick.
Thank you. So I had some additional questions. And on the historical tax credit, which would put close to $1 million, I think Eric said, into the project, how confident are you of those tax credits? And if they don't come through, will this project go on? Looks like Randy wants to address that one.
Yes, while Randy comes up to the podium, Councilmember Purinton, excellent question. I am, just based on previous applicants and the history of it, I am fairly confident, given the stage where they're at. I believe they're in phase 2 of that process, and it is a pretty lengthy time-consuming process, but by the time you get to phase 2, that will have expended a lot of time, typically. And so, but I'll allow Randy to explore or further elaborate on that process because he's the expert in that.
Is it okay if Randy does? Answers your question?
Well, of course.
Okay.
But while he's there, because my next question was about CPACE, and I wanted a little bit more information on that one, and I'll just let you.
So first, with regard to the tax credits, we've been doing tax credit projects for 20-some years now, and we will not fail. There are 3 things that have to happen on these projects. The first one is when they're tax credit projects, we will make them work. And we work very closely with the State Historic Preservation Office, the National Park Service, and so we will not fail. Because for us to fail, we have to choose to fail, and we're not going to do that. And what that really means is that we work with these guys because every building's a little bit different. We know all the rules, but there's a lot of gray. I like to say this book is all about gray. And so every single historic building, of course, is going to be different. And so there are guidelines. So that's why we work with these guys. If we get into a situation that we're not familiar with, and we have what we think is the appropriate approach, we'll certainly check it out with them. We don't just launch off and do things. So we're very confident. We don't fail. We never have failed, and there's no real reason that we should fail. So on that point, and then about CPACE, it doesn't currently exist. We would like it to exist. We will be using that program a lot when it does exist. In the meantime, there is still the federal tax credit available for renewable energy systems. We'll take advantage of that, but we'd love to have that CPACE program.
So could you explain what you just, excuse me, Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Explain what you just said. Whenever you said we're going to take advantage of the federal tax credits, we're waiting, because CPACE has to be approved legislatively for the state, and I understand it did not.
It has to be adopted by
as
the
a policy.
city and/or city and county.
Okay, so whenever you say you're going to take advantage of the federal tax credits, how are you going to take advantage of those?
So the federal government right now has a tax credit program available for certain energy, well, actually it's renewable energy projects. The state also has a separate tax credit program, but the federal program is, after this new bill was passed, is going back to 30%. So 30% of the cost of a renewable energy project can be taken as a tax credit, which we use as a return on investment for our limited partners. Does that make sense? I want to make sure I'm making sense.
Well, yeah, you do. So I have two more questions. One's a comment. So I am concerned about parking on the street, because you have 24 units, then you have business or commercial, and so I just get real concerned about where people are going to park, because realistically, there's going to be cars.
I'll just remind you, you are the owner of several thousand parking spaces in the downtown.
So you want them to use our parking
Sure.
garages?
Yeah, they mostly sit empty, particularly from 5 in the afternoon until 8 in the morning. So you own that asset, and it's producing next to nothing.
Are you going to cut them a deal? Like we want a deal cut for us?
I mean, so it's why you have, realistically, I mean, cutting through, I mean, that's why downtowns, why we don't have a parking requirement. We don't want buildings tore down for surface parking lots.
Right.
You've invested tens of millions, maybe over $100 million in the value of all these parking garages downtown. And if they were privately owned and you were trying to get a profit out of them, you'd be trying to find a way for those spots to be full 24 hours around the clock.
Could we put them on the market and have someone else run them?
They're not clamoring at our door because they're not really that great of a business model for parking in a downtown like ours, candidly. If it were Chicago, sure.
Councilman Purington, Mehmet is chomping at the bit.
He wants to say
Would it be
something.
okay if
He wants
we-
to buy your parking garage.
Sign me up, yes. No, I just wanted to also acknowledge and offer kudos to the city's parking division and department and board. There is an existing program also within the city right now to utilize our parking structures, and property owners can go and contract with the city to get a package of, let's say, 12 parking spots for 12 residents that they have, and they collect the pay from their tenants, and they pay in one lump sum to the city, and it's a very smooth program, and that could be also leveraged for this property.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you.
And just
Could I
one
say
other.
something about that question?
Sure.
Quickly.
Just because, I mean, we own property already, the Tracy Lofts, which was our first project in 2012 that did not have any off-street parking. And we had 19 units in there. And I admittedly was a little worried at the time. Since that time, though, we rarely do people that want to look at an apartment even ask about parking. When they do, I give them all the options. I mean, you can park on the street at certain hours, you can park in a lot, there's various other parking, privately owned lots. But the bottom line is that people who want to live downtown, that's not the thing they're concerned about.
Okay.
They really don't care about that. If they want to be downtown, they look for a place to live, and then they'll figure out a place to park. And we do actually have tenants who don't have cars.
Great.
It's true in this town. I mean, it seems hard to believe if you don't live downtown, but it is true. So that's just, we've never had a problem. We've never had an apartment sit open for a long time because we didn't have parking. It just doesn't come up.
Councilman Purington, another question?
Just one comment, and it was addressed in your minutes, Mehmet, with the concern that that the TIF district is overcommitting its dollars. So, I mean, I like this project, I'm not saying, but I do kind of watch that. So I'm glad to see that your board is looking at that also as a positive outcome, I hope, for the TIF board. So thank you.
Thank you, Randy. While you're at the podium, and then we'll turn over to Councilmember Gulick. The original building did not have the crown on it that the artistic drawing showed, and didn't have little turrets on the end. Are you planning to fail by screwing up your tax credit application?
No, actually, if we go back to the original building, it did have those. Those are coming back.
Oh, okay. I just remember the picture with the Billings Hardware sign on it that looked like a flat top there.
The battlements are on the corners.
Oh, okay. That's because that's facing east there. Okay.
Right, and so it's a little obscured. And then we've got other photos that show that pediment that's on the middle of the.
Okay.
We would not screw it up. I can.
All right. I just
will not screw it up.
Wanted to make sure that wasn't part of your plan to fail. Councilmember Gulick and Councilmember Neese.
Well, much as I'd love to engage in kind of discussion and vote on this, I need to recuse myself as I am a partner at High Plains Architects.
Thought that might be coming. Councilmember Neese.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt, this is a good project, I think, of the city. And I was a little concerned about the parking, but I think you're right. The clientele who are going to rent this are not going to need vehicles, or if they are, they'll have a demand for our parking garages to start leasing out, and we'll actually start filling our garages. So that's good. I did want, Randy, if you wouldn't mind, because the lead plat and Billings are interesting, and I was in one here recently. And when you go into the facilities, they have purple signs in them, right? And about not drinking the water. It's not potable water. So you say you're going to have recyclable water in this building. So are you having like some type of treatment plant within the building? Is that how that works? Can you kind of explain how where you're recycling the water for?
We're not using recycled water for potable uses at all.
Oh, you're not?
We have rainwater in the Tracy building in our office too.
Okay.
Which is different. But generally we use the collected water for ancillary uses, toilet flushing and that sort of thing.
Right.
What we're thinking of that we're going to do at Tracy, and we're still going back and forth trying to figure out, we've got to figure out exactly what our demand is and how much we can store and how much we generate and blah, blah, blah. But we're thinking of doing a gray water recycling in this building rather than very much rainwater collection. And we would just then reuse the gray water, which would come from showers and sinks, to flush toilets.
To flush toilets,
for
right.
whatever little bit of irrigation that we're responsible for.
Okay, and then you would have those signs on there, not potable, do not drink.
Unless you want to.
Is that part of the leads?
Toilet, everybody understands that it's not potable, so.
Right.
So yeah, we don't have to do that.
Okay, and that's all going to help, again, reduce the cost of the rents for having to be there.
Right, because we dramatically reduce our city water consumption when we do, particularly for toilet flushing.
Great. It'd be interesting to see this develop, so give us some tours when it's getting ready.
Very good. Thank you. Any further questions or discussion on the motion? We do have a motion on the table. Anything further, council, before we proceed to, there is no public hearing on this, so we'll move to a vote if there are no other questions or comments. Okay, we'll proceed to a vote. The motion is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation in your packet. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously with the exception of Councilmember Gulick, who abstained. Thank you very much. Bring us to item number 3. Tony, would you read item number 3?
Item number 3, public hearing to receive input on the city's FY 2021 through 2022 draft comprehensive annual performance evaluation report, CAPER, for community development block grant and home programs. No action is necessary this evening.
Okay. Brenda Beck will be a presenter once the PowerPoint is up and running. After a presentation and any basic questions from council, we'll have a public hearing on item number 3.
Correct.
Brenda, when
This way.
it's all ready, it's all yours when you are ready.
Excellent. Thank you, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. We are going to review our comprehensive annual performance evaluation report that is required by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development for the use of CDBG and home funds that the city receives every year. It covers one fiscal year. We're also reviewing, besides our achievements, we're also looking for comments on community needs, including the upcoming home ARP allocation. And there'll be plenty of other public hearings and comment periods with home ARP. We're just in the process now of developing a survey for our social service providers that'll go out later on this year. And our Community Development Board actually expanded this public hearing process because they want input on designing their upcoming application process. They released their applications in December. We have a really proactive, engaged, highly effective board. And I actually, this is the first time we've actually written an annual report, and I left you a copy today, and it'll also be in the city administrator's report. But one of the things that you'll need to know about our Community Development Board is that besides the 6 low-income area representatives, we have three at-large area representatives. But they also have 68 years of collective experience on our board, approximately 7 years per member on average. They have a huge history of volunteer service in the community. They're very highly educated. We have business owners and a carpenter and people with master's degrees in public relations, communications. We have the election administrator for Yellowstone County is also on our board. Of course, political service. If anybody knows Jim Corson, he has an amazing history of political service. We also have real estate services, social services, healthcare, and also a title officer on this board. So they're amazing and a wonderful group of people that help us plan, deliver, and monitor all of the projects that we undertake with federal funds. So I just was thinking, how many special allocations have we actually received over the history of time that at least I've been around? I started with the city in 2003, and we had some smaller amounts coming for fair housing initiatives, a couple of stimulus projects from prior presidents. We also applied to the state of Montana in 2009 for the Neighborhood Stabilization Program funding. At that time, we were having a lot of foreclosures in the nation, and we received almost $570,000 to start our foreclosure program back then. And then we didn't have anything from the government for a very long time until the pandemic hit, and then we received 2 allocations that totaled $909,000 for pandemic impact. And during that whole big money train that was happening at Congress, we also received the home ARP funding allocation to assist people experiencing homelessness. So we received Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnerships Meeting. I don't know why it's capital HOME. I can't figure it out. But we actually were able to serve 27 home buyers last fiscal year, which is kind of amazing given the housing market that we have right now. We didn't expect to be able to really serve anyone, but 27 homes were sold to families, and they purchased their first home. When we shifted gears from our regular programs into coronavirus activities, now we have 2,200 people that were receiving services for coronavirus impact, and over 400 people were assisted with the programs that the AmeriCorps Vista members were assisting. This is a very different outcomes portfolio than we usually have. We usually have numbers of units, household units, housing units. And this is a huge, heavy on the individuals and people aspect, which I think was the intent of the funds in the in the first place. So we always look at our minority race, our minorities, race and ethnic race minorities, compared to the ACS data. This one I think is from 2019 to make sure that we are reaching the applicants most likely to apply for these kinds of services, and we hit those marks. So our ACS data, our non-minority rate is 88%, and we had a non-minority beneficiary group of 62%. So you can kind of see how the programs met those goals across the board. One of the most major accomplishments that my staff and the board have facilitated were 3 separate allocation processes for CDBG CV programs. And so they ran a process in June of 2021, and the City Council approved allocations to the Salvation Army and the Downtown Restroom Project. And in December 2021, 11 projects were funded through 3 city parks. Actually, there were more projects there, but I'll get into some of the ones that were canceled this year. And you also approved a fast-track social services process, which there were 6 awardees in that group. In your board report, you'll have, it's on our website too, at /CDBGCV. You'll see the funding allocations and what the funding is being used for. And then in April 2022, you also approved 3 different pandemic impact projects with CDBG funding and a little bit of CV that was returned back to the City Council for allocation through those organizations. So our challenges this year, actually I've never put this on a slide for City Council, like in 15 some years, isn't that? So that actual board report kind of forced me into acknowledging some of the challenges that we had. HUD does throw this money out with a big fancy letter, and it's all over the news, and we have no rules. We don't know how to use it. We don't know how we can't use it. We don't know anything except for maybe 4 or 5 sentences about how the funding should be used. Maybe 6, 9 months later, they actually publish rules, and then maybe 9 months later, they'll publish how to interpret those rules with added training. On home ARP, as recently as 2 weeks ago, they were rolling out additional brand new training on home ARP, on how to use the funding, how to log beneficiaries in their internet system. It's a crazy process, and it drives us mad because everybody's pounding on the door for this funding, and we're like, we don't know what it's being, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how we're supposed to use it. We don't know the rules. We don't want to allocate funds and then have to repay it with non-federal funds. So we're pretty careful about how those things are rolled out. We also received a higher loan repayment revenue. So when we do first-time homebuyer projects or home repair projects or the foreclosure projects or even affordable housing development, oftentimes there are loans put out on those projects that are assigned to the property by trust indenture and deed restriction. And then when those properties change hands, that money comes back to the city. Well, because a lot of our property owners had sold their investments, their primary investments, we received a lot of program income, and it just kept rolling in. And let me see, last fall, we knew we were going to run up into what we call a timeliness deadline. Every spring, HUD only wants you to have in their IDIS system 1.5 times the amount of the prior year's fiscal grant, so like roughly $1.5 million. And we actually did not meet that timeliness deadline by $111,000. And the reason that we did not meet that goal was because we had 2 project cancellations due to unforeseen circumstances with HAB Development's Western Hotel and then Parks Wi-Fi. Those were both released this spring, alas, weeks before the timeliness deadline was to hit. Now, we don't have any impacts from missing this timeliness deadline this year, but we need to work very hard to expend funds in order to not miss it next year. Otherwise, I need to do a year-long workout plan for HUD, and they have to approve it, and then we're going to be monitored every month for expenditures. So I'd like to avoid that. We got to keep our head down with HUD. That would be a good thing. The other issues that we have, and that you've heard it over and over again with your infrastructure projects, with new building projects, we do have a workforce and contractor shortage. We have difficulty with housing prices and the supply of foreclosures that are available. We believe that foreclosure or properties that are in trouble are being purchased by investment folks before they actually get foreclosed upon. The foreclosure list is public information. It gets sent out a couple of times a month at least. So everybody knows, including realtors, investors, they know what properties are coming up on the foreclosure list. So it's a very difficult time for us to be able to capture those foreclosures for our home buyers. And then, of course, building supply availability and a few items I hear from our contractor our carpenter person, that there are still some items that are very hard to get and some building supplies that are very, very difficult, short supply and high pricing. So that equaled a lower foreclosure and homebuyer program process. So our goals for the upcoming year, we'd like to maintain HUD compliance with all of our awardees. This is the first time we have a very big list of awardees. We have to monitor those projects every quarter. There's outcomes, on-site visits, that kind of thing. Facilitating the construction of one housing unit on Stefanage Drive. I think that my staff put out 4 requests for bids and proposals processes, either 3 or 4. It's outlined in the caper. That were not responded. We received no takers on building a house up there. So we're hoping to actually put a modular home unit on that, and are working with our purchasing agent to make sure that that's an equitable, equal opportunity contract. So we're hoping to get a house on that Stefanage Drive property. And we're working on home ARP really, really hard. So it just goes over the administration of that. We have to expend the funds by 2030. The properties, if we do any housing units at all, need to be monitored for over 15 years. Whomever comes in to do additional, they need to bring a lot of additional money in. If we're going to use it's like $700,000 that can be used for rental projects or non-congregate shelter. And that will fund 2 units according to HUD. 2 units. So in order for that to be a bigger project, a lot of additional money has to come in. All right. So board comments. The board wants you to know that even though we have small outcomes, there are actual families that are benefiting. Instead of leaving money unexpended, that 27 families, real families, have moved into various properties across the city. And yes, that's I think that's a row house project on the right. They used to be selling a couple years ago for under $100,000, and they're well over $200,000 at this point. So we're just happy we had any homeowners at all. I believe we have 15 projects now that are pending the first-time homebuyer program as well. So it's still moving forward. I think that's it.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you for your thorough report and for the service of your board. Questions for Brenda before we open up for public hearing? Councilmember Joy, Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Ms. Beckett, for an excellent presentation. I really appreciate your hard work on this. I just wanted to, having had the pleasure of being on your board, not on your board, ex officio with your board, I get to hear kind of the background stories of what happens with some of this stuff, and it's really fascinating. I would just like you to kind of summarize when the project was identified in the park, in North Park. I don't think a lot of council members realize that that process also involves an environmental assessment. And I was just wondering if, not in any great detail, but just to let us as council appreciate the amount of staff time that it takes in order to expend these federal funds. So thank you.
North Park. North Park is very close to an adjacent refinery with materials that are combustible. And when we're using federal money to put a shelter where people would congregate, HUD does not, they will not approve any investments where people may be injured after they're congregating there. And Ed has done these before, Councilmember Uladal, and these environmental reviews that we have done, HUD has, we're doing investigations of any underground spills, any leaking underground storage tanks within 3,000 feet, which is all the way to the hospitals, all the way to Metro Park, all the way to the refinery. I'm going to say it took my staff about a month and a half of full-time work, probably 220 hours to complete the environmental assessment for the shelter project. So that included also the adult exercise equipment. we had to measure within feet of where that equipment could go. We had to stall on the parks. They were ready to just jump out of the gate. We're like, please just do not buy anything, because if you expend funding, we may not be able to reimburse you, number one, and we want to make sure we're compliant with HUD. I started consulting other places across the state, but they thought maybe we should put up a blast wall. So I'm like, okay, so you want us to put a blast wall. I'm sure the police would very much appreciate a visual block from the main road there into the park. No, that's not going to happen. It's just it's a very tense process in that area. The upshot of HUD's very intensive review of this kind of combustion really limits the projects that we can do around the refinery, to the point where we do not think we can fund them. If you think about we receiving maybe $700,000 in CDBG funds, how much of that will we have to put into, say, housing units located in that area for the blast wall side? And then, because we have that finding, we have to monitor the entire project to make sure that it is indestructible during a cataclysmic event at that refinery. So now I've committed them to a few more $1 million in blast materials along that side of the structure, which then becomes very infeasible to use a few $100,000 or even $500,000, one of our largest awards for projects in that area. So it was intense. We complained about it at least for 3 months. It was awful.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Councilmember Shaw.
Thank you. My question is about the funding for non-congregate shelter, and I'm curious about, is there a possibility for us to combine that potentially with a low barrier shelter option of saying, I'm just wondering if there's a potential for some federal funding and if it would be possible to put these two projects together where you say, okay, we want this funding for non-congregate shelter, that'll be the first priority, but when it's not being used for that, perhaps it can be used for just as a low barrier shelter. Is something like that possible as another?
It is exclusively for housing units and non-congregate shelter.
Okay.
So there could be no addition. It can't be like a group room with, like unrelated family or unrelated people outside of a family unit to stay there. So they're very specific about it. They want these to be housing units or shelter units that are solitary.
So what if they were, but you had 2 in a building of 24? Would it be possible to receive federal funding for 2?
Yes.
Fund the rest of it through the city? I'm just thinking creatively, like maybe there's a way to kind of put these 2 projects together.
There is. And there's also a way to fund shelter with community development block grant funding. We have actually met with Off the Streets, and my staff has met with Off the Streets and reviewed the allocation process for CDBG and home. It's called the Affordable Housing Development Program, and you folks put some funding in there earlier this year. So that is an open application process. They can submit anytime. It just, the qualifications that you have to be a housing developer are pretty high. So it's open for those who have the capacity to develop it and to maintain compliance. If we don't receive any applications, which we have not, I think there's been 5 different inquiries, including the Meadowlark community that was in the newspaper today. They're outside the city limits, but my staff, called them, talked to them also about state CDBG funding that can be used in the county. Talked about the annexation process. I mean, we're trying to assist them any way we can, but funding can be combined. It's just complicated, and there are rules for each of those programs that have to run in tandem. So the reason why we don't get those applications is because it's very sticky. It's a sticky, very long monitoring process. So you have to be a skilled housing developer to access those funds.
Thank you. Councilmember Bernice.
Thank you, Mayor. There's a lot of information here, but I have a question regarding, I think you mentioned this, and I think we approved not long ago about some equipment and things like that in the parks. You did some park developments.
Yes.
And so that's not housing. So how is that funding coming And then how can we utilize that more in our Parks Department? For instance, I know Castle Rock Park is right next to some low-income housing development. They'd love to have some adult exercise equipment in the park. So is that something, because they're right adjacent to it, that could be looked at being applied for?
The reason we were able to fund parks projects really without doing a lot of like surveys on use of those parks is due to the pandemic. And it was a one-shot deal for the 2019 and 2020 CDBG funding to be used in tandem with CDBG CV funding. And that's the reason we could get those off the ground. Yeah.
So that's no longer available then?
That's no longer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Princeton, and we'll move to a public hearing soon.
So, thank you, Brenda. And I tried to read through that document, and it was a heavy read for me, but.
The chewy thing, yeah. Yeah.
So, there were a couple of things that kind of stuck out to me. One of them was that you list your extremely low income versus low income people. And a lot of those were targeted, I guess is the best word that I can say, for first-time home buyers. So you mentioned just briefly about foreclosures and everything. So how do you help the individuals, the homeowners, maintain home ownership, whether it's through insurance? I mean, home ownership is completely different than rentals, and not everyone is really cut out to be a homeowner. So how do you manage that? How do you manage not having a lot of foreclosures?
Such a great question. We actually, you'll see that $569,000 that came to us in 2009. That neighborhood stabilization money came with a requirement that a certain percentage of that funding, I don't remember off the top of my head, but that was given to, that had to be used for people that were 50% of the area median income and below. So within that neighborhood stabilization program and now the current foreclosure program, let's say a home is valued at $200,000, but that income family can only make payments with 30% of their income on $100,000 of that property. We actually just put a silent second lien on the property for the remaining value of the home. So our silent second lien would be $100,000. And that just sits there without charging interest until they sell the property or refinance the property, and then they would pay it back. So that is the way that you picked up on that's a fine detail for the foreclosure program. And we've only done a dozen of those properties over the years, but that is how that program actually assists those families. They also have to do 8 hours of pre-purchase counseling as a requirement. And we also partner with Homefront, our public housing authority. Their family self-sufficiency clients are often referred to the first-time home buyer. So they do education and budget training over a very long period of time to get them prepared for home ownership. So that's a kind of a multi-pronged approach there.
Okay, and another question. Regarding the VISTA program, I think many times it's considered a volunteer program, but it's not volunteer, is it? I mean, the people that actually, the young people that come and work as VISTA volunteers, they actually get paid. Do they get paid personally, or the program gets paid? Because, well, you can explain that.
Sure. So the program is named Volunteers in Service to America, and it's an AmeriCorps, one of the AmeriCorps subsidiaries. And they do receive a living allowance that is below the poverty level in Billings. And I do not remember exactly what the monthly income is. It was, the last time I checked, it was like $1,200 a month that they can pay that they use for housing, for health care, for utilities, to pay their phone bill, that kind of thing. So it's a very small amount of funding. And we have lots of ways that we can help them stretch that dollar.
So how do you stretch that dollar?
Well, we receive a little bit of money from our host sites, and when they can pay the city in order to administer that program, especially some of the host sites that have had multiple years of AmeriCorps members, so they'll throw us a few $1,000s, and maybe like $2,500, I think, is the ask, and we buy whole foods for them. So, like brown rice by the 5-gallon bucket, and they have to learn how to cook rice and cook oatmeal, and so we buy foods in bulk, and then they get jars and they take them home, and we have to print instructions. So quinoa, things like that. So we actually provide some canned goods to them too, to help them just, have a baseline of meet their dietary needs.
So it was my understanding that Vista volunteers, or the program, I shouldn't say the volunteers, but the program, they actually, in order for them to be here, and if they're going to work in a specific area, that the service organization that uses them, that service organization does have to pay to have those Vista volunteers there.
If they can, they absolutely do contribute up to $2,500.
So it's not required?
We do ask them to do that. If you have a brand-new organization like Dog Tag Buddies, for example, we actually asked the city administrator to approve a waiver for those brand-new organizations that they're not, if they have, $3,000 in the bank, they're not going to be able to give us $2,500 of that. Especially if when Rich St. John talked about designated donations, if those are donations to start Dog Tag Buddies, they're not going to be able to use it for anything else. So we get them somebody that can raise funds for them for a year, and then we ask them if they can pay it the next year.
Thank you.
We work individually with those organizations, but absolutely, we're more interested in getting Vistas placed with nonprofits that can use them and that need them, than that being really, that's not an income generator for us, for sure.
Thank you very much. Council will move to a public hearing if there aren't any other questions. Don't see any, so we are required to have a public comment opportunity, a public hearing on this report. Is there anybody present online or in person who would like to comment on item number 3? Do not see anybody present, and there is nobody online, so we'll close the public hearing. Just to confirm, Brenda, our requirement is to have the public hearing. There is nothing to approve, and so I believe that we can just move on, correct? Just confirmation of that. So I asked, all we need to do is have that public hearing. There is nothing to approve, and we can conclude item number 3. Council, maybe we can quickly move through item 4 before we take a break. Tony, would you read item number 4?
Item number 4, public hearing and resolution for a street name change from Crescent Street to Western Sky Drive, generally located at the southeast corner of King Avenue West and South 48th Street West. Staff recommends approval.
I'm going to use my assistant. All right, let's do it. He's going to take care of this.
Are you sure you didn't want to take a break before Debbie goes?
He's trying to get on my bad list tonight. So my presentation will be 2 minutes or less. This is a pretty straightforward one. There is a property, as soon as Andy gets this pulled up, called Crescent Street, and it's south of King Avenue, west or east of 48th Street. And the only property owners that own property around here are the developers. They're the ones that have developed the one parcel, and you can see the location there. So the name change was requested by the developer and property owner. And you can see here there's some storage units that have developed, again, owned by the developer. The one lot is the only one that's currently addressed to it, and other lots will be addressed to it in the future. But it's pretty straightforward, just Crescent Street to Western Sky Drive. That's it.
Thank you for that presentation. Any questions for Debbie?
Well, it had the facts.
Oh, why was it called Crescent in the first place?
Do you know? I'm going to let Rick answer that.
All other names were taken. Rick.
She did 2 minutes, I'm going to do 30 seconds. So, Rick Luth, Olds Anderson Stewart, we represent the client who's developing the area out there. It's been through several partnerships, different partnerships since it started development 5, 6 years ago. And when it first came out, there were some discussions about street names. Crescent. It was originally Kilimanjaro, but it ended up being Crescent. And they now are embracing the theme of Western Skies. The lower project is going to be Western Skies Village. They'd like to go back to Western Skies on this. So I would ask for your approval of that. I won't bother you with the public hearing process. Thank you very much.
That's great. Okay. Any other questions for staff? Is there a motion then? Oh, I'm sorry, public hearing. We do need to have a public hearing. We'll open up for public hearing on this item, number 4. Is there anybody who'd like to be heard? Please come to the podium if you do. No one is coming forward, and there's no one online, so we'll close the public hearing comment. Lots of hands. Councilmember Tidswell.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution for a street name change from Crescent Street to Western Sky Drive as recommended by staff.
Second by Councilmember Gulick. Motions for approval. Discussion on the motion. Is there any discussion? Now we'll proceed to a vote. Seeing no further discussion, if in favor of the motion, which is for approval, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, please say nay. Motion passed unanimously. Item number 5 deals with light. We're going to have a lot of assessments. Maybe we treat those as a package. Take our break now, because I don't think we can get through the rest of it in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back as close to 7:30 as possible. 7:25 now. Get started.
You can run the clicker. I'll get you going. You gotta share screen. You can answer all the questions in the front.
She wants
I got it.
Okay, we'll reconvene. We left off with item number 5. Tony, would you read item number 5?
Item number 5, public hearing and resolution setting special improvement lighting maintenance district assessments. Staff recommends approval.
Thank you very much. Jennifer DeRay, our Deputy Public Works Director, is our presenter. Jennifer.
I'm still waiting for my assistant Andy also.
She's been waiting to say that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item tonight is for approval of the resolution for assessing the cost for street improvement lighting maintenance districts for FY23. So it is per state law, the assessments must be approved annually by resolution. Each district has to cover the cost for each individual district of the maintenance, electricity, and administrative costs of each district. We have 197 streetlights districts in Billings. And that means that they're operated as 197 separate funds in that they have their own set of accounts so that we can keep track of expenses and revenues separately for each district. We have city-owned districts of 65 right now. And for city-owned districts, the responsibility then falls to the Street and Traffic Division for maintenance. We have 123 districts that are owned by either Northwest Energy, Yellowstone Valley Electric, and we have one that is owned by MDT. And then we have 9 districts that are a combination of utility-owned and city-owned light districts. So each year we look at every district and analyze the expenses from the previous year and what the reserves are, and recommend assessments for the next year. For FY23, we're recommending assessments of $2.5 million, which will increase 170 districts for FY23 assessment amounts. And then the other 27 districts have either no change or a decrease in assessments. So this is an overall increase of assessments of about $98,000 from the previous year. I should note, though, we originally calculated assessments and we calculated an overall decrease to begin with because we used electricity cost increase of 3% originally. And we do have a number of districts that have reserves that are in excess of what we need, so we were planning on using those up. However, we recalculated everything just a couple days before the council memo for this item was due. You may have seen Northwest Energy applied for, they had an application in with the Public Service Commission in August, and they're asking for an overall increase of about 22%. So that increase would not go into effect until May. So that is only 2 months of this fiscal year. However, they asked for an interim rate increase of 15%, and that will go into effect in October if approved. So we revised it and we ended up doing annualized electricity increases of 12%. If it is approved, though, next year we would see much higher rate increases because we were still able to buffer that increase with those excess reserves this year. So tonight we do need to hold a public hearing, and then we're hoping to approve the resolution assessing the cost for FY23.
Thank you very much. Questions for Jennifer? We do have a public hearing on this item later. Questions, Councilmember Purington?
Just a quick question on the slide before that. When you have, some of those districts having no change, decrease, increase, of course, the majority of them have an increase. Why? Why are there some districts that are more than others?
So Northwest Energy did a conversion. There's several reasons, but one is Northwest Energy did a conversion of their districts to LEDs. And in that, it greatly reduced the costs. We're now going to increase them again with the rate increase because it affects LEDs too. But some of those districts then ended up with extra reserves, so we're just using that up, and we were able to no change kind of some of those districts. And then we have some districts that may have increased greatly last year because they were going negative, which we can't have. They might have had a big expense that we had to cover. And so then we're just decreasing them back down to the right level.
Thank you. Councilmember Gillick.
Jennifer, as light fixtures are being replaced, are any of the city lighting districts having LED conversions as well? I believe they are. Is that right?
Councilmember Golick, all of our new districts are going in with LEDs. We have an issue with our light districts in which we can't do like those widespread replacements because normally there have been some of our fixtures that we can retrofit with LEDs, but most of them, we need new fixtures as well. And we can only do that with our older light districts in two ways because of the way the resolutions were written. And that would be to recreate those districts with the correct language in them or do an SID for all those fixtures in the district.
Maybe a follow-up is I guess I would be interested in working with Public Works to have a resolution changed, I guess, so that we can do that. Is that something that is in the works, that change in the language of that resolution?
So all of our new resolutions have the correct language in them, and they have for several years now. It's a matter of, so if we wanted to recreate all the older districts, we could do that, but remember they could protest and actually shoot down the district. So we're trying to weigh our options. We're coming up with the best plan on whether it's SID, recreate those districts, so we're working on it, but we just haven't come up with the best plan yet.
Thank you.
Jennifer, I got a question for you. To what extent can the city or does the city control the type of light in non-city districts? When they're put in, do we require certain efficiency levels, heights, style, aesthetic considerations? And part of what motivates the question is there's some awful number, I don't know what it is, but I'll make it up. Within 3 or 4 blocks of Sky Point, we've got 7 or 8 varieties of different lights. And aesthetically, some are a lot more attractive than others. So to what extent is that within the city's purview?
Mayor, we would still have the engineering division work with the utility company on those. The downtown districts are old, and there's actually a number of different districts that cross over downtown. So it can depend on which district it may be in. And you can have a different district from one block to the next. It's that convoluted.
And that explains how we got into this situation, but how do we talk about how we not continue in that situation of hodgepodge?
So Mayor, we always work, even if it's not a city-owned district, to ensure that it's up to our specifications at this point going forward. Again, to retrofit something like that, if it's a city-owned, and I think there are some city-owned districts, some utility-owned districts downtown, if I remember right. I'd have to look at that, though. Northwest Energy just went through and did their LED change, and so I don't know what was left and what was not. I'd have to check into that.
But do we have aesthetic requirements either for ourselves or for them?
We do have our own standards, yes.
For ourselves, but not necessarily that would bind other new districts by another owner?
The city still has to approve it.
Okay. We have to approve it, but do we have a policy that would provide us a basis for disapproving particular types based on aesthetics, if you know?
We have standards that we would have to go by, and if they were outside those standards, we could deny.
Okay. Okay, further questions? Councilmember Denise?
Thank you, Mayor. The non-city-owned districts, well, if these resolutions were to be redone, I think you said that they could actually, the residents could then have a protest, and then it could be voted down. And so then no lighting district, no lights, take all the lights out, and Northwest Energy takes the poles and go home. Is that kind of what happens?
Well, that's one of the predicaments that we're trying to work out. And maybe if it was voted down, you just leave the old lights in there for a while. But if it becomes a safety issue, at some point, we would just have to terminate the district, even if they did vote it down, and pull out those lights.
Okay, and so I know that, I think in your memo, I think you mentioned email, if the Northwest Energy districts, they continue to charge for capital improvements from day one. They never, even though the stuff's capital is paid off, they continue to charge that. Is there a way that the city can buy those out, or have the residents in the district there buy those out? And if that's, how would that happen?
Councilmember Neese, it would take money. Really, that's all it does is take money. We've actually looked at going the other way, as getting out of the light district business and seeing if the utility company would take ours over. But we do want to be considerate of the end user, and we don't want their prices to increase either.
Okay, see, so the residents, then the district would just pay a higher price, but eventually that buyout would be paid off, and they would just be paying kind of like what the city does for the improvements, and then once they're paid off, and then only the maintenance of the light and the cost of electricity, correct?
Right. And that higher cost, though, would probably be over a period of about 15 years that they would have higher costs.
But eventually, 40, 50 years down the road, they wouldn't be continuing to pay for things that are not having to be replaced.
Correct.
Thanks.
Okay, council, let's move to a public hearing. We'll come back. We'll wrap up questions, and we'll be looking for a motion on these assessments. Is there any public comment? This is your public hearing. We'll open the public hearing on item number 5. Is there any public comment on item number 5, present here in person or online? No one is coming to the podium. Anybody online? No, there is not. So seeing no public comment, we'll close the public hearing on item number 5. Councilmember Joy.
Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution setting special improvement lighting district assessment as recommended by staff.
Thank you. Second by Councilmember Tidswell. Further questions for staff or discussion on the motion? Anything else? Okay, if in favor of the motion, which is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, please say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item number 6. Tony, would you read item number 6?
Public hearing and resolution revising encroachment rental fees. Staff recommends approval.
Encroachment fees, back to Jennifer for her presentation on those.
All right, this item is another quick one, I think. It's annual encroachment fees for FY23. So an encroachment is any privately owned structure that is in the right-of-way. We do have a permit process for our encroachment fees. So it starts with an application in which we charge a permit fee. If approved, then we assess an annual rental fee. And there are a couple of reasons why we do assess an annual fee for the encroachments. And the first really is just to cover our own costs. And then the second reason is that it's Public Works' responsibility to ensure the safety and accessibility of the right-of-way. The right-of-way is generally dedicated to the movement of vehicles and pedestrians. And if we did not have some kind of deterrent, we'd end up with more structures in the right-of-way. And there are often times where property owners do have a choice as to where to put these structures. So we have been, or back in 1985, we started charging the encroachment rental fee at $1 per square foot. And that stayed in place until FY21, in which we changed it to $2 per square foot. We also changed the methodology at that time to a two-tier system. Tier 1 has minimal impact to the right-of-way. It includes things like awnings, overhanging signs, and conduit. Tier 2 has a major impact to the right-of-way. It causes part of the right-of-way to be unusable. And it includes things like restaurant patios that extend out onto the sidewalk, fences, stairs, and sheds. We also started in FY21, the first year of a 5-year kind of phase-in plan for the Tier 2 encroachments, with the idea that in 5 years, we would get the fee to be equal to 50% of the average taxable value of adjacent land. Right now, that value is $7.35. So in FY22, that was the second year of the plan, and we increased Tier 2 encroachments from $2 to $2.80 per square foot. And for FY23, we are proposing that the Tier 1 rate stay at $2. It is covering our costs there. We are proposing an increase in the minimum annual fee from $10 to $20. And this is an annual fee per encroachment. That minimum just covers our cost of processing everything. And then we're recommending for year 3 of the 5-year plan to increase the Tier 2 rate from $2.80 to $3.80. So for FY23, we have 132 encroachments that would be assessed to 157 tax codes. And this will bring in about $83,000 in rental revenues for us, an increase of a little under $18,000 over FY22. So the table at the bottom has a variety of encroachments and what their FY22 and FY23 assessment would be. The first one is the underground conduit, no change because it's Tier 1. Then we have a fence that's encroaching into an alley, and that one increases from $42 per year to $57 per year, an increase of $15. The other next two are pretty similar. Bottom one is an outdoor patio that's in the downtown area. That one right now is paying $1,400 per year, would increase by $500 to $1,900 per year. And again, for this item, we need to hold a public hearing and then hopefully approve the resolution tonight.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to start you with a question, if I may. In the fourth paragraph of the staff report, it outlines these various increases that you just ran through with us, and then concludes with a sentence that says, this additional revenue is recommended to be utilized in the beautification of the right-of-way. I think you just told us that these fee increases would bring in about an additional $18,000. So my question is, generally, where might these increased dollars go to beautify the right-of-way? And more specifically, I'll tell you what my proposal is, and I'd like your response to it, which is, I received a fairly scathing message on Facebook the other day, which is not unusual. But in this case, I was pretty sympathetic because the general was complaining about weeds along Broadway. And I don't know if he was referring to actually in the street, in the curb, in the sidewalk, maybe adjacent, but I got the impression pretty much in the right-of-way. And the obligation to take care of weeds and sidewalks belongs to the adjacent property owner, is my understanding, at least if once they exceed 4 inches. The problem with that is, of course, many people will think, well, it's the street, it's not my problem, or it's the sidewalk, it's not my problem, it's just along a major arterial or collector, that's a city problem. Or if they do understand it, they just don't do it. Or even if they're inclined to do it and they do understand it, the 4-inch requirement, when it's a 4-inch weed or patch of green weeds in a sidewalk looks really bad at less than 4 inches because it sticks out so much. It's so visible. What about a pilot program to do a community spraying, not throughout all of our arterials, but just as a pilot on some of our most visible arterials and collectors to be picked by the Public Works Department for a year or two, where we would spray once or twice, put a guy on a on a four-wheeler with a spray tank, go down with a wand and hit these areas. It seems a lot more efficient than expecting literally tens of thousands of people who live along streets to take care of this. Not to get rid of those rules, but just to sort of supplement compliance. Could we use this $18,000 for that? And do you have any response to the idea of some sort of a pilot program where we would take responsibility for spraying in some major arterials and collectors?
Mayor, I think we have a lot of, we do have a number of residents along arterials, but we also have everyone else in the city that is responsible for their weeds on, collectors and on residential streets. I would not want to use the money, and obviously you can disagree and direct us to do what you want to do. But I would not want to take on extra responsibility that we've already determined is on the property owner. And maybe we could do something else with an educational campaign, different things like that, but I would hate to take on additional responsibility when we can't get our own work done as it is.
Okay. I guess my response to that, I've got 100 people drive down my residential street, and I've got 20,000 who drive down some of the arterials, so the visual impact is very different. But thank you for that. Questions? Council members Rupsis, Purington, Joy?
Thank you, Mayor. I second that. I would love to see more involvement in keeping our right-of-ways clean by the city. And to me, that means we need to look at shifting some funds maybe to focus more on maintenance of what we have. But anyway, that's a different conversation. My question about this is, I think we need to be encouraging restaurants and other similar places to be having outdoor seating options. And when I look at the $1,900 for that 222 North 28th, they've got a little fence around an outdoor patio area, no permanent fixtures there or anything like that. And that's scheduled to go up to $3,500 to $3,800 over the next couple of years. That doesn't seem right to me. I don't like that. It doesn't really seem to be tied to what was it we said, inspection, administration, and ongoing right-of-way management. I'm not sure how that adds up to, in this case, $1,900 or in the future, $3,500. Can you explain that and why? To me, it's one thing if we've got a big, stairwell or a permanent fixture in a right-of-way versus something like this.
Sure. So the $2 per square foot covers our costs. The additional money is what is going to go back to beautification of the right-of-way, and a lot of it, a lot of our encroachments are in the downtown area, so that's probably where it would be put back into. But the council decided, as a very conscientious decision a couple years ago, to deter a little bit, and there is a value to our right-of-way. So that is why we went with the adjacent taxable value model, because they're using up part of our very valuable right-of-way to make tens of thousands of dollars with that patio area.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Purington and then Joy.
Thank you. Tom, I kind of agree with you, and you weren't part of that vote, and honestly, I can't remember how I did vote, but I just think that we need to be pretty business-friendly. And I noticed on most of those, they do have a sidewalk that comes out for them, so it doesn't impede traffic. Maybe it makes it a smaller, like the ones on Broadway, that makes it a little bit smaller. I did look at the one on Florine, the fence in the alley. And so whenever you say you're going to beautify the right-of-way, are you going to beautify that right-of-way? And what would you do? Because there is parking, there's the road, the right-of-way, the fence, and there's people parking in that right-of-way. It's a grassy area. It's, so how do you beautify a right-of-way? And especially like with these, what are you going to do to beautify those?
Councilmember Parrington, first, we haven't established exactly the program we're going to use to start using these funds. Right now, we haven't used any extra funds. It would not go back to each single encroachment to beautify that area. The additional $15 isn't going to get us very far on Florine there. So we're looking at more things that could, whether it's sidewalk art or whether it's, signal box wraps, different things like that was kind of what we were thinking, but we haven't ever come back to council with our direction yet.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Joy and Councilmember Neese, do you have your hand up? Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I recall that the mayor at a ribbon cutting for the opening of a bike pathway, we had a discussion about goat's heads and the sidewalk, and Mr. Pigg from the Parks Department was enlightening us, and Scott Walker also enlightening us as to the problem that goat's heads create and the fact that they're actually very hard to kill. So I get that, the weeds
Not
on
real
the edge.
goats. These are little.
Goat's heads.
Don't send us any nasty notes. Yes.
No, the plant that's purple with little flowers and sends up these little spiky seeds that puncture your bicycle tires. And those are goat's heads, and they're really annoying. But anyway, going back to my actual question, the outdoor patio, has the owner or the person who is responsible for paying this given us any feedback about, because this is pretty substantial, I think, if you go back to what we've increased it to. Has there been any feedback from any of the people who actually pay these fees as to what they think of it? Thank you.
We've had no feedback, no complaints.
Thank you very much. I recognize Councilmember Neese, Councilmember Tiswell.
The $1,900, just answer my own question. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It is an annual assessment. That's where I was going. Thank you.
And you okay, Councilmember Neese?
Thank you, Mayor. Jennifer, I appreciate you continue to work on this for, it's been several years now, and we're working towards getting this to be a little more equitable. These are profitable businesses making some good revenue off of the city's right away. And so I think that $1,900, and you look at what it is monthly and what those, like you say, those table turns, they earn a lot on those. So this is really a good deal for them. And I think that's why they're not here, for public hearing and complaints, because they've realized they've had a really good deal for a long time. And again, we're only getting up to 50% of the value, not even the full amount that they have to pay for their normal dining rooms. These are going to be 50% of the cost. So it is very business friendly, but just making sure the city gets something equitable. I would be interested in hearing more about the beautification, whether it's sidewalk repairs, and it wouldn't have to necessarily be downtown because these are all over the city. But that's type of thing is something maybe we can flesh out during some work sessions or something like that. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Any further questions before we go to a public hearing? Don't see any, so we'll open up for public hearing on item number 6, encroachment rental fees. Is there any public comment on item number 6? No one is present here to comment in person. Is there anybody online? The answer is no. So we'll close the public comment period on item number 6. Councilmember Boyette.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Having conducted a public hearing, considered written and spoken testimony, I move to approve a resolution revising encroachment rental fees as recommended by staff.
Second.
Motion made, seconded by Councilmember Neese. Discussion on the motion. Motion is for approval. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Purington.
Well, I was going to make an amendment to keep it at the 280 for the current rate at this point until a plan is come up with. I don't think that we can project, what that money is going to be used for. So I would make an amendment motion to continue on Tier 2 with the annual rate of 280 per square foot and the annual rate of per linear foot. Increase your minimum annual fee to the $20. But other than that, I would keep it at the current rate.
Okay, you heard that motion. Is there a second? I think the motion dies for lack of a second. So we'll continue. We do have the underlying motion on the floor. Any further discussion on the motion? Before we proceed to a vote. Seeing no further discussion, we'll move to a vote. The motion is for approval, consistent with the staff recommendation. If in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. If opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion passes, all voting in favor with the exception of Councilmember Purington, who votes in opposition. Item number 7. Now, we've got multiple sub-items here, and so I guess we need to have it, we'll have a single public hearing, but separate votes, I believe is what the staff is recommending for procedure here. Correct me if I'm wrong. To read these, since we're going to have one public, Andy, we're going to have one presentation on all 7 or all the items. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess we need to, assuming we have to verbally announce this. I'm not sure if that's a legal requirement or not, but just to be safe and to test Tony's stamina. Tony, would you, I guess, read all items 7A through, I think, whatever it is, 7H or whatever the final item under 7J, I guess it is. Go ahead.
I'm glad this is a physical test instead of a mental test instead of a physical stamina test. Item 7, public hearing and resolutions allocating assessments on the following: SID 2919, SID 2990, 20, SID 2921, SID 2922, SID 2923, Park District 1, General Obligation Debt, Park Maintenance Districts, Nuisance Property Abatements, Weed Abatements. Staff does recommend approval for all items.
Thank you very much. Then Andy Ziller, our Finance Director, is our presenter. Andy.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. I was criticized for not enough color, so I'm working on that. I found the background with the most, so yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's right. I had my kids design it for me. So as Tony mentioned, there's many items here, 10 actually. One presentation, it's actually pretty abbreviated. There's a lot of detail in the staff reports, so I'm not going through all of that, but just hitting the highlights. And then one public hearing and individual votes on each of these. Items A through E are all SIDs. These are SIDs that have been created, the work's completed, and we're asking to assess the individual properties that benefited from the improvements. So item F, Park District 1 would assess 1.597% of the taxable value of every parcel in the city. This is a citywide park district. It would generate $3.6 million, which is consistent with the FY23 adopted budget. This is a 16% increase over the prior year. Originally, staff had proposed a 6% increase. Then there was a recommendation or the adoption by council to increase the capital projects. So that brought it to 16%. It's a median, that's an annual assessment to the median home of $49. General obligation debt, mill levies, these are for the streets, library, and park debt we have outstanding. Originally, the budget had estimated 8.3 mills would be needed, but because taxable value came in at 1.5%, the 1.5% growth, we actually need 8 mills divided between the 3 of them there, for an annual tax levy of $25 for the median home. Item H, park maintenance districts. There are 36 park maintenance districts across the city, varying in size, as well size with respect to the assessment amount, as well as the number of properties. The staff memo there did detail each specific district, the gross amount for each district, and the change. Total revenue proposed here is $1.27 million. It's a median annual charge of $141. And this is not citywide. These are the individual districts. This is a 9.7% increase overall, not individually. The thing I'll highlight here is the Parks Department has an hourly charge for the labor and equipment that is used to maintain these parks. And that hadn't been increased, I believe it's a decade, perhaps longer. And wages have gone up, as well as the cost to fuel vehicles and replace vehicles. So they are proposing an increase to the hourly rate. So that's driving some of this as well, some of the increase. Item I, there are 3 nuisance abatements that have been court ordered. So these assessments would go onto the property to cover the cost of the removal of the fence, junk vehicle, and stored items at those properties. And then finally, is that finally? Yes. Item J are weed assessments. The original resolution in your packet had 47 properties for a total of $10,040. Since the time that was produced, we have had 6 parcels come in and pay. And so there are presently 41 properties. Oh, that was as of this afternoon. There may have been a couple more. But there are 41 properties for a total assessment of $8,360. So when this is approved, staff is asking that you authorize staff to remove the parcels that have come in and paid, because we don't want to assess them twice. And then there are 2 parcels that are recommended for reduction by code enforcement. Those are parcels A03523 and A18004. Reduced to $174 and $90 respectively. One of them was due to, it was mowed twice, so the admin fee is being recommended to be waived on the